People want to join something that's bigger than themselves. They want to join a team that they may not all think alike, but when that mission is given to them, everybody rows in the same direction towards that mission.
In this episode, we meet Dr. Walter Diaz, a distinguished military officer and humanitarian whose career spans from safeguarding nuclear arms to leading inspection, peacekeeping, and disaster relief efforts across the globe.
A lot of times you learn more than they do. They don't have as many resources, and they make magic with what resources they have. Sometimes we adopt some of those techniques. Disasters can go one of two ways. You can have people just go towards the scientific term of entropy and become total disorder and chaos, because everything in the world tends towards entropy. Everything tends towards disorder. And that sense of community and humanity comes out.
Duty, resilience, and unwavering commitment define the heart of a true leader. I'm Alex Ponce. In this episode, we meet Dr. Walter Diaz, a distinguished military officer and humanitarian whose career spans from safeguarding nuclear arms to leading inspection, peacekeeping, and disaster relief efforts across the globe. A proud son of Puerto Rico, Dr. Diaz's journey is marked by extraordinary service, profound personal sacrifice, and an enduring love for his family and homeland. His story is one of courage, principle, and the relentless pursuit of making a difference.
Hello, Dr. Walter Diaz. How are you?
Doing very well. How about yourself?
Doing good so far. Thank you for joining us. You could not be a more welcome guest on the show, and I really appreciate you taking the time to be here and share your experiences for our audience. I wanted to dive right in and ask, tell me about your current role. You are Deputy Command Surgeon at U.S. Southern Command, and I was curious to know, what does your day-to-day life entail that you can, speak freely about, and what drives your passion, in order to be the best at what it is that you do?
Well, first of all, before I tell you what it is that I do, I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to be here. I think it's important for people to be able to share their experiences, especially when we have people that are emerging in their careers and they see, how is it that this person got to where they got, and what is it that drove them? So I appreciate it. I think that I don't know if it's going to be a lot of value, but I'm just going to share my experiences and just let you know what it is that's got me to this point. As the Deputy Command Surgeon at U.S. Southern Command, my day-to-day activities are, if we have any medical evacuations or anything that goes on down in South Central America, the Caribbean, and we have to evacuate a patient because they got sick, that'd be a service member or civilian. When we have people deployed down for an exercise, which is 95% of what we do, our exercises with our partners. Before they go, we ensure that everybody has their vaccinations and is ready to go, and we identify what healthcare facilities, local healthcare facilities, we would take those people if something were to go wrong. Mm-hmm. In addition to that, we also serve as the health advisor to the commander. Our current commander is
the commander of Southern Command.
The commander of U.S. Southern Command is really has us on speed dial anytime that anything goes wrong in the AOR, and I say AOR, that's a military term, area of responsibility,
okay,
which encompasses everything south of Mexico and the Caribbean basin, except Puerto Rico and U.S. Virgin Islands. Mm. So it's 32 countries, 17, we call them dependencies, because like French Guiana belongs to France,
right?
And we have the what we call the ABC Islands and Aruba, and Curacao that are Dutch,
right?
And we have a couple of British protectorates also in the area. So that's why we say, this number of countries and protectorates means it's sovereign territory of other countries.
But you provide support on
If we have
on their country's behalf.
if we have anybody deployed there, for example, for anytime we have disaster relief, or we have a hurricane, that's what we call disaster relief, a hurricane, a tsunami, which we had one in Chile that was associated in 2010 with the earthquake that hit. An earthquake hit in 2010 in Haiti that everybody remembers about. It was devastating. But at the same time, it had an earthquake in Chile because they're on the same fault.
And it wasn't just an earthquake, it created a tsunami.
A tsunami, and then we went ahead and provided support. We provided a mobile hospital in Chile. Chile is a rather advanced country and has good healthcare facilities. But as we all discovered here during the last hurricane, and that impacted a lot of North Carolina, doesn't matter how developed you are if your hospital is gone.
Yes.
So
or underwater.
Or
whatever.
all those things. So and my day-to-day is, as I say, it could be anything from evacuating a patient to the commander wants to do an exercise in country X, and we have to do an analysis to see, hey, where in country X. Also travel down to South Central America and the Caribbean to engage with ministers of health, with also directors of medicine of the military, as we undertake programs with them to cooperate and collaborate.
Would you say that the U.S. military is the primary connection point between the United States and most of the countries in the Caribbean and LATAM in general when it comes to healthcare?
Well, that's a tricky question because a lot of times when there's a big something happens like happened in 2010 with the big Haiti earthquake, we parked the hospital ship off the coast of Port-au-Prince and started treating patients. Normally, the majority of the times, the U.S. military does a lot of the logistics of moving patients, helicopter lift, and things that civil society doesn't have. And just to be blunt, a lot of optics, you don't want to see, military people.
Sure.
A lot of the nations themselves don't want to have a bunch of military people there treating people from a foreign country.
So even if it's the best or most optimal solution, oftentimes public relations is a factor.
Yes. And again, I mean, we have healthcare providers in our military hospitals. And when we have to undertake an operation like that, that means we're drawing physicians, nurses, and everybody from our military hospitals that actually see, the spouses and children and other people that live at the military bases. So very cautious about that. If there's a national emergency, of course. During COVID, we parked the USNS Comfort in New York City, and we parked the USNS Mercy, the two hospital ships, in Los Angeles.
Now, just to be clear, these hospital ships, these are the ones that we've seen on TV, on CNN. They're these huge white boats that have a big red cross, I think, somewhere on it. And it's run by the military, but basically it's a mobile hospital. It's wherever the boat is, that's where the hospital's at.
They actually have CT scan, MRI, everything. The only thing they don't have, and it's because of the limitations of, ships made of metal. If you know magnetic resonance imaging, normally they have standalone trailers away from anything that's metal. And when you're going to go get an MRI, that's why they always insist take anything metal away from you. Yeah. Because it'll drive it into the,
here's
the magnet.
Here's a steel ship, that's kind of a problem.
Yeah. So that's why we don't have MRIs on the ship. We have a CT scanner, which provides pretty good imaging for a lot of traumatic injuries. So
do you take one, like a portable version on the ship, and once you park, then not even that.
Everything's on the ship.
Really?
Everything is on the ship. And it's great because it's the coolest room in the ship. When it's really hot out there, I was on the ship on one of its many trips, and we were in Haiti, and it was
scorching.
Yes. So when they were giving me the tour, the captain of the ship, who was a friend of mine, said, "Hey, come on over here." And we went in. Let me show you the CT scans. I've seen a CT scanner before. It's like, no. But listen, feel how cool this is. The rest of the ship is, once you go out on the deck or at the helo deck or anything like that, it's metal. So
Yeah, it's metal. You're in the Caribbean, sun scorching, humidity levels.
yeah. So yeah, it's I really what drives me and my passion for this job is when you notice you have the difference. You see the difference in people's faces when, for example, if we say we're going to do a course a trauma training course for a partner nation, say, hey, this is how you treat trauma. And you see just a smile and the light bulb come on people when they graduate and they thank you. And it gives you that sense of accomplishment and that you're doing something that's for greater society. And I think that a lot of the motivation for people joining the military, any military, is just personal opinion. I've lived it with many people, being surrounded by the military for 40 years. People want to join something that's bigger than themselves. They want to join a team that they may not all think alike, but when that mission is given to them, everybody rows in the same direction towards that mission. So I think as you take on these challenges, you know that you're not taking them on alone. Sometimes, it's a little storming and norming, getting the group to go in the right direction, but that's what the process is about. That goes on in any organization in the world. The U.S. military, Apple, I guarantee you the design of the iPhone was not done overnight.
No.
Because you had engineers arguing over, is it too big? Is it too little? Where are we going to put the microphone? So we go through the same thing saying, do we have too many people? What mixes of providers do we have? Do we have enough pediatricians? Are we going to? So those are the kinds of things that we do and we learn from lessons, but every operation or every disaster response is new.
Well, I mean, that brings up an interesting point that I was actually going to touch on later, but I think this is the perfect time for it. There's already a difficulty in most corporate environments for collaboration. There's this sense that the only leadership style that can or should be used is, command and control, or control and command, as the case may be, dictating, just do what I ask you to do, don't do more, don't do less. And the studies have clearly shown that collaborative work, when the time is available, when there is, the luxury of that, usually results in better outcomes. How do you see collaboration in the arena of the military? Because, I mean, if anyone ever invented command and control, it's you guys.
Well, I think the military, it really depends on the operation, to be honest with you. Because when you have a crisis response and you have something happening, you cannot be deliberating over what are we going to send.
Right.
What do we have? Send it. We're saving lives.
Right. So
that's very different from, we want to do an operation where we're going to, this city in the middle of Central America or South America doesn't have drinking water.
Right.
We're going to do the well. So where are we going to put the well? We're going to build a school. Where are we going to build the school? So a lot of that takes a lot of analysis, people on the ground saying, hey, where do people live? Where's the closest point of people that have access to the well? Where is it that if people are not going to school, kids are not going to school, why aren't they? Is it that the school's too far? Maybe we'll build it closer. So these are all the kinds of things that go into it. But
so the illusion that it's just one person dictating, that's actually not common, in the sense that it's more collaborative, because rarely is there an emergency. I mean, when there's an emergency, there's an emergency, but usually,
I mean, hurricane happens.
Well, that's different, right? And in that case, you usually get a week's notice,
Grab all your stuff, grab all your toys and go. But when it's something, there's two types of planning that we do. We do crisis response, which is and deliberate planning, which goes through the planning, and you have milestones and what are your objectives. And of course, in the military's case, this has to be all tied to the national military strategy and national security strategy. And I know I hate to say this, but on many occasions you hear people saying it's the vision thing. It is the vision thing. I think vision is extremely important as to what it is that you're trying to achieve. Because if you don't have a vision that everybody can identify with, people don't know what they're doing. We've gone to units where we go and ask the people that are actually providing a treatment, why are you here? Well, I'm here to provide healthcare to the local population. No, you're not. You're here because it provides you the opportunity to practice your skill in an austere environment while helping the local population in support of the national security strategy.
Okay, that's a very nuanced way of seeing things.
It has to be, because you have two different audiences.
Right.
You can't go to the nation and say, hey, we're here, we're going to provide healthcare.
We're in the neighborhood where we thought we'd help out.
No. You have to go in, coordinate, talk to the Ministry of Health, talk to the government. There's a growing influence of China in the region that, they just built a port in Peru. So we call them external state actors, people that are not from the region coming in to our territory. And what we do, it used to be called healthcare diplomacy. That's basically what we do using soft power, is providing that softer look of the U.S. military, because normally people see the uniform and they say, oh, and let's not kid ourselves. History's not good.
Well,
so given that and the infamous Monroe Doctrine and all the things that have gone in the past, but I have to tell you, every country, regardless of the government, in South Central America and the Caribbean, has a positive image of the United States. I think that's several reasons. A lot of them have family here. There's many countries that have family in the United States, and they see that there's a way for you to get to where you want to get to in the United States. There's a way that if you want to, have a hot dog stand in the corner and start a business, you can be successful.
Right.
That's not true in a lot of our the rest of the region, because there's a lot of protectionist policies, there's a lot of regulation, and fairly there's corruption, where there's several levels that you have to pay people to be able to start a business so that they approve your permits and everything is good.
Sure.
So, not singling anybody out, there's corruption in this country too. And
it's a universal problem that's as old as time.
Money talks.
Money talks.
Money talks, no matter if it's dollars, colon, it doesn't matter. So,
but the military, its primary purpose is for national security interests. However, even though the United States has amongst the largest and most developed military force in the world, it's not at war 24/7. I mean, most of the time, it's usually in battle-ready drills and at the same time providing assistance to other people, which is where you come into play. I mean, you're really set up for battle medicine, and yet at the same time, you're not constantly in this mode.
And now that you mentioned that, I'm glad that you mentioned that because the war in Afghanistan was over and we pulled out, a lot of our healthcare providers got a lot of practice in trauma medicine, high velocity rounds and all that. That's gone.
Yeah.
So what can we do? We can partner with countries that have, a lot of those types of injuries.
Sure.
To be able to help them out. We learn new techniques, because one of the misnomers of saying we're going to go help, a lot of times you learn more than they do. Because they don't have as many resources, and they make magic with what resources they have, and sometimes we adopt some of those techniques.
Yeah.
So it's a win-win. Although when you come in with 200 of your best friends providing care to a town, people say, "Oh my God, they're invading us." No, we're not.
It's funny. Even though I see everything through the prism of either business or law, because that's been my experience, science is at my heart. And it's funny, when I saw the withdrawal of the troops, when that order went through, for some reason I got this flash of helium as a byproduct of nuclear reactors when they're doing the fusion. And as a result, you have all this excess helium everywhere. So you would have, children's parties and they would blow up the balloons. All of a sudden, there was no helium. It was very hard to get. For some reason, it wasn't as plentiful or it's very expensive or whatnot. And by the same token, I thought the same thing. I'm like, well, a lot of those trauma surgeons are going to end up at Jackson Memorial Hospital. They're going to end up at Cleveland Clinic. They're going to end up at the top hospitals, Johns Hopkins. And they're not going to get that same training short of there being some other incident or helping out. And that goes to your point. So you partner up with these nations that we have relationships with in order to render assistance, but there's reciprocity. You're getting something out of it too, experience, and well, it also helps public relations when everyone's helping each other out.
And I think one of the lost messages that I try to emphasize in U.S. Southern Command that I think a lot of our leadership is adopting is that in the U.S. military, when you're a military healthcare provider, you are a military healthcare provider. That's it. You don't have a private practice. You don't see patients on the side. Some people moonlight, but it's only on the emergency room, and that's when they first join the military because their pay's good, but not that good. So as they go up in rank, they say, "I stop."
Yeah.
Everywhere else in our hemisphere, a military healthcare provider goes to the garrison in the morning, sees his patients, and in the afternoon he puts out a shingle and sees patients. So when we say that we are training partner nation providers, we're not training just the military and improving their capacity. We're improving greater society by giving these providers additional training that would not get otherwise.
Right.
Because they're military, they get some military trauma training, then they can go to the local emergency room, which, by the way, the best trauma surgeons and trauma physicians in our area are in public hospitals.
Yeah.
Because there's where the majority of the heavy trauma comes.
Well, of course. I mean, I saw it when I was doing criminal defense. We had a lot of gang-on-gang violence. Well, that bullet, whether it's coming out of a gang member's, automatic, or it's coming out of a soldier shooting another soldier, it's still a bullet going through the skin. It's still the same trauma.
Yep.
So very transferable skills, very practical skills.
And I think sometimes that's lost. They can say, "Oh, why are we just training in the military?" And I have to remind them, we're not just training in the military. That guy that just went through combat casualty care training at 1:00 in the afternoon has his own shingle outside, and he's probably at a hospital treating somebody that got the most common trauma in the entire region is motorcycle accidents.
Okay.
That's
interesting.
Traumatic injuries are because guess what? You
are the car.
You are the car. And it's basic physics.
It's fun, but it's very dangerous.
And there's not been one time that I've visited anywhere where there hasn't been some catastrophic motorcycle injury because, and a lot of times it's a combination. They think they're in a car and they go through the cars and they don't see them, then they, change lanes and oops, there was a motorcycle there. Or they just think they're Evel Knievel and they, go 100 miles an hour and have a flat tire and, the pavement wins.
Well, the worst ones I usually see are like in Europe, like in Paris, where they're zooming past cars that are actually parked. All of a sudden, the driver of the car opens the door.
That's it.
And the motorcyclist just goes through it like it's a wall for all intents and purposes.
And at that speed?
Yeah, because they're going to be speeding. No one ever goes the speed limit.
Yeah.
So you mentioned Puerto Rico, tangentially. You're from there?
Yes.
So tell me about your upbringing in Puerto Rico. Tell me what your early education was and how it shaped your view because, science, healthcare, global health initiatives, logistics, you're a logistician, in many great ways. But it started somewhere, and how did it develop for you?
Well, I was very lucky. I have to thank my parents because they gave me a fantastic upbringing. My father was an entrepreneur.
Okay.
And he opened up his own tourism business in Puerto Rico. He joined the Army. When he left the Army, he had saved money.
Okay.
very few people in the Army save money when they earn their first enlistment. Well, he did.
Okay.
He came back and started his own tourism business, and then slowly but surely built up and had his own tourism company in San Juan, in Condado, which is where all the tourists are.
Right.
And at the time, it was the Sheraton Hotel, which is now the Marriott. This is 1960-something, so most of you watching.
I'm
A
sure.
long time ago.
I'm sure it was lovely.
Long time ago. So he was an entrepreneur, and he really, he passed on this saying to me. And he said, you don't have to be the biggest tree in the forest. You can be a bush. But if you're going to be a bush, you better be the best damn bush in that forest. That gave me the work ethic that I have today. That has driven me to what I have. I went to Catholic school from K through 12. That was it was Academia Santa Teresita, which is now closed. How long ago it's been? I think the Carmelites did a good job in giving me that work ethic and that stick-to-itiveness and learning what made me tick, which is what's always made me tick is telling me that I can't do something.
So
you tell me I can't do something?
You're going to be, not only are you going to do it, but you're going to do it better than anybody else.
Exactly. So
That's how I started skydiving, by the way.
they really pushed, and then one of them figured out, I know what, you can't do it. Really? So that's really what got me started. And I remember when I joined the Air Force, I was doing intercontinental ballistic missiles. I was, 90 feet on the ground, getting ready for Armageddon.
You were a Minuteman.
Yeah.
You were the one of the two people in that room that turns the key.
Yeah.
For breaking the code and the whole war games thing.
Yeah. Exactly. I was that.
That's terrifying.
That's how I got my start.
Okay, how old were you?
22.
So you were in charge of being part of the end of the world, basically.
Global thermonuclear war, basically.
That is terrifying.
So, but you know what? It's funny because the human brain is a fantastic thing.
Yeah.
It protects you from yourself. That's how we go through grief.
Yeah.
That's how we go through traumatic experiences, and that's how you handle it. And to be honest, most of us handle it with humor. And
dark humor, probably.
Yeah, a lot of dark humor. And then in my base, we not only had ICBMs, we had B-52 bombers that were the ones carrying the nuclear weapons too. So we had two legs of the triad, in a nuclear triad in my base. So we had a lot of people to banter with and joke around, and anybody that was not privy to that probably was saying, these guys are crazy. What are they saying? But it's I'm telling you, the human brain is a fantastic entity that protects you, and you develop defense mechanisms, and you just see it as a job.
Well, let me ask you this, because actually that was the premise of the movie, which was in part based on a book. The reason that you had two officers be responsible for doing it, and not simply a machine with a code that gets sent from the White House, is because there has to be an element of humanity to it. There has to be a fail-safe. Not necessarily that there's a glitch with the machine, but perhaps a glitch with the order. And you're kind of bifurcated because your ethics go into that, and you're like, on one side you have to follow the order, at the other side you have to make sure the order is sound. And you can't question the order under those conditions because, there's a lot of verification just to get to the point where you do what you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
And yet at the same time, you have no control over anything other than you turning the key. And even that is somewhat not in control if your partner disagrees with you.
Yep.
There are fail-safes in order to guarantee that you follow through. So how, as best you can, I mean, this is like a crazy scenario that almost no one on Earth other than Minutemen have experienced. Well, maybe people on nuclear subs. How do you deal with that? Or do you basically just see yourself as a tool or an extension of the process?
I personally dealt with it in this way. I knew that there were so many checks and balances in the system that if I was getting an order to launch my weapons, that not very long after that,
Mm-hmm.
everything in my country would be destroyed. So I justified it as, if you're sending it my way, I'll make sure you don't have a country left either. But that's the way I thought about it.
That's interesting.
Because if you think too hardly of it,
Mm-hmm.
that's what they call conscientious objectors that say, I can't do this. And there are people that went through the training that when they finished the training said, I can't do it.
And I could only imagine that there are people that went through the whole training successfully and halfway through their tour doing that.
Yeah. But again, it's
It's a very dangerous job in its own way.
yeah, it is. And it's, I always equated it to the hours and hours of boredom, just broken up by the seconds of terror.
Yeah.
And it was, to this day, I believe, mutually assured destruction, which is the J.F. Kennedy strategy,
Mm-hmm.
has kept us out of nuclear war.
Yeah.
And I think I read The Crisis of October, the book about the Cuban Missile Crisis,
Mm-hmm.
and what decisions were made and were not made. I think I internalized that when I was there. I actually read it before I went to my job and took it. And it just, if we're doing this,
Mm-hmm.
we know there's going to be nothing left. So let's make sure that they have nothing left.
Well, the Harvard Kennedy School, logically,
Yeah.
follows that philosophy.
Yeah.
And if you study up there, you're going to get that.
Yeah.
But yeah, okay. Now, while you've been at it, you eventually started getting your education as part of being in the Air Force. Now, you've received, you got your DBA from FIU right here. You have your MBA from Auburn. You've also received countless certifications and commendations. Did any of these occur while you were still in the Air Force? Because you were in the Air Force for a very long time.
I was in the Air Force 22 years.
Yeah.
And I have a master's in human resources.
As well. I think you got that one
From
first.
Troy University. I got it. And the one from Auburn I got while I was still in the Air Force. So I got them both while I was in Montgomery, Alabama.
So no one goes and gets anything that has human resources in the name unless you're a people person. You like to know how people work, how they operate. Do you feel that it helped you less with traditional human resource tasks and more with leadership?
I think it helped me understand human behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And it helped me kind of figure out what makes people tick and what motivates them and what doesn't. Because I know it took those nuns in Academia Santa Teresita some time to get this, hey, Walter, we can't get Walter to do what we want him to do until Sister Mary Esther, may she rest in peace, figured it out and said, you can't do it. What? I can't do what? So, yeah.
Challenge accepted.
Yeah. And I mean, it motivated me through my entire military career. And, and I consider myself to be very lucky to have that switch, because not everybody has that switch that motivates them no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen it. I have 2 adult children, and I have 2 grandchildren, and nobody knows kids better than their parents, and what makes them tick. And I think that looking at the human part of human resources enabled me to say, studying organizational behavior, organizational theory, and seeing, what motivates people. I think my depending on how you ask my kids, they may agree or disagree. I think it made me a better parent.
Okay.
To not all the time chastise, but at times use the carrot and stick, to motivate them, and mostly the carrot. Because I remember my kids were decent students when they were in elementary school. They moved on to high school, and I challenged them. I said, if both of you get at least a 3.5 in the old scale of GPA, a 3.5 GPA, the entire time through halfway through your second semester in your junior year, I'll get you a car. I had to buy 2 cars. So
It sounds like a problem, but it isn't.
it isn't. And now, I mean, they're in their 30s now. But at the time, they said they're probably doing it for me. No, you're doing this for you. You just don't know it. Because that enables you to have a good foundation to do well for the rest of your life. And I'm very proud of both of them. They're both doing very well in private industry. And I think that motivation, because I thought of myself. I mean, not everybody's motivated by that, but I thought of myself and saying, well, maybe throwing down the gauntlet and offering this challenge will do it. Yeah, it was a little financially challenging, but
For a military man, yes.
it was 18. They were 18 months apart.
Of course.
So
of
it
course.
was
They
one
might as well
after
have
the
been
other.
twins while they were at
Exactly.
it.
They were, when one was a senior, the other was a junior. So it was one after the other. I had to buy 2 cars.
So the car dealership people really liked you.
And the insurance people even more.
Oh, you have more. Okay. That's interesting. Tell me about you've had a distinguished career in the Air Force. ICBM missile combat crew officer, a strategic arms inspector in Baghdad. I mean, I wouldn't even know where to start talking to you about this because it's difficult. But okay, so you're a young recruit. I don't know if you go in first as enlisted and then you go to become an officer, but
I went through the Reserve Officers Training Program.
Yeah.
And ROTC in the University of Puerto Rico. And so when I graduated from the University of Puerto Rico, I got commissioned.
Okay.
I came in as a second lieutenant.
Okay.
And that's how I was a missile launch officer.
It's a great way to start, by the way. So now start your career. You're a Minuteman at one point, which I guess makes you the ideal person to disarm. So one moment you're preparing to take lives, the next moment you're doing what you can, in an indirect way to save lives. How was that experience? That dichotomy? One moment, one turn of a key and a few buttons, and the next moment you're trying to figure out how to disarm it or how to stop other people from doing it or to make sure that at least their stuff is safe.
I was also part of the negotiations team for START and INF in Geneva, where we were trying to disarm the former Soviet Union, and there were
Well, I saw there was a
4 parties that were to it. I think it was Russia, Ukraine, Kazakhstan, and Belarus that had nuclear weapons that were parties to the treaty. And what we were trying to do is eliminate or reduce the amount of weapons. I actually sat in a portal monitoring facility for 2 months in Russia, just monitoring that the missiles that they were producing were not a prohibited type. So it was unique in the fact, like you say, before I was saying, maybe this is one of my targets,
right.
And now it's like, well, we're trying to make sure that the world is a better place and safer place by reducing that. That was being in Russia for 60, 70 days was a very unique experience because we were not in Moscow. We were about 1,000 kilometers east of
I see Votkinsk,
Russia, and it was a port monitoring facility. It was good because it enabled me to use my my diplomatic skills that you have to use because you can't just outright say, hey, what are you doing? You have to say, hey, here's the treaty. Here's what it says.
Sure.
Let's all swim in the same direction. And in Geneva, I was the advisor to the representative to the Secretary of Defense for treaty negotiations, as they use you as a weapons expert because you know our systems, you expected theirs, and you kind of know theirs. So when there's any discussion or argument about it, you would just turn around the chair and say, "Hey, what about X?" And then you would give them the answer. So it's been, and then given that I already had that arms control experience in the same agency I worked, it's like, hey, we're going to start UN Resolution 687, which is the one post Iraqi invasion to make sure that they have no weapons of mass destruction. We're going to start sending teams. And I ended up being on one of their teams that was, I don't know, I think things around me are never uneventful. I was
You like to keep it light and fluffy. I
Yeah,
get it.
yeah.
No, but I'm just wondering because when you're dealing with the former Soviet states and they no longer have that umbrella of a federal government that's controlling things to a high level, which arguably could be said was not really there from the beginning, but now even less so. Now you have the worry that terrorists may steal some of this material and use it for their own nefarious purposes. I remember in the 90s, that was the big concern. Not necessarily Russia or what used to be, the Soviet Union, but that some rogue element was going to take hold of this because such lack security or corruption or whatnot.
and there are movies made about it.
Well, that too. I mean, I think the movies make light of how
Yeah.
serious and how close we usually get to these kind of problems. We're always a trigger away from a thing happening. But I imagine that similar things were occurring when you went to Baghdad, where you're not just dealing with a government, which at least makes it easier. You're dealing with one entity. No, you're dealing with a lot of little factions and rogue elements that.
Well, they at the time Saddam was still in charge, so he didn't want to mess with the UN
Okay.
because at the time the UN had sanctions on him, and we had people that would go with us and escort us for our inspections, and they made sure that we were safe.
Were these financial sanctions or
Oh,
military?
Yeah. Oh yeah, a lot of financial sanctions on
Financial.
Iraq. Yeah.
Okay.
So he wanted sanctions lifted. So he wanted to be on his best behavior. So,
Right.
This is
Well, that's the carrot and the stick. We'll
yeah.
take away this if you give us that.
It's 1995, I believe it was, and then when we were there, he started being himself and attacking northern Iraq because there's three distinct factions of people in Iraq. Iraq was really a country created in the post-British colonial period.
Mm-hmm.
In the north, you have the Kurds. In a little south of that, you have a mixture of Sunni, Nazariyas there, and then further down, Shia, and then further down are the Sunnis. So you have three distinct factions of people that. One of the things that dictatorships do is they force people to like each other.
Okay.
There were no problems with factions between the Sunni and the Shia and the Kurds when Saddam was in charge. Because if you happen to be Sunni and you happen to be Shia and you were arguing, he would kill you both.
Okay.
So, and your family tree. So when people saw that, it's like, oh, come over here, give me a hug. I love you. So when that forcing function is removed and you have a power vacuum, that's when you have the different factions
at each other's throat.
at each other's throats and do what they want and have the Iranian the Iranians are predominantly Shia and they wanted a Shia Iraq and they undermine the government. They still do to this day. So because they believe in Greater Persia. They used to be a great power.
None of this is a secret.
back.
This is open public policy.
Yeah, this is public policy. It was a few centuries back.
Yeah.
You study history.
There's nothing new here.
No, nothing new. Nothing new. It's the same thing when you look at
Before it was scrolls, now it's computers, but it's the same message.
Exactly the same. Exactly the same.
Yeah.
And when you study the divergence of the Muslim religion between Sunni and Shia, there's just a couple of events that created that divergence because they were both followers of the Prophet, and they still both follow the Prophet. But there's different events that are triggering them to follow the practice in a different way.
More aggressive.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's obviously putting it mildly, but
Yeah.
okay. So you're there. That's another experience where it's you and I imagine a large convoy, a large group of individuals. I mean, you're not going there by yourself.
Well,
Or maybe you do. I
for
don't know.
UN peacekeeping operations, it is.
It's just a small group.
It's you and your little blue UN hat. That's it. No weapons, nothing.
How are you received by the country?
There's And we're driving in these vehicles that say UN on the side, so everybody would go back and take their shoe off. Anybody that knows the culture in the Middle East, showing the sole of your shoe is an insult. So they wouldn't.
So
just show
United
you-
Nations is not seen
No,
in a favorable way.
because the propaganda machine of Saddam Hussein really cranked it up. We're in this position because of the UN.
Mhm.
The U.S. attacked us because of the UN. We did nothing. Kuwait was just another province that we were just trying to recapture.
Mhm.
So when you have a monopoly on information, you can drive the agenda, which is what he did.
Well, that's step one of a coup. Take over the media. All right. So I don't even know how to proceed other than to loop around to your humanitarian missions, because now you're going from disarming and trying to establish peace by way of either control of their weapons or removal of their weapons. Can't shoot someone if you don't have the gun to shoot. So now you're saving lives. And you have earthquakes and hurricanes like Irma and Maria. And I know these have a very personal effect on you. Can you share a moment from that, especially, the effect it had perhaps on Puerto Rico on you?
Well, it was. I don't even know where to start, because you're used to kind of with what I call a 2,000 mile screwdriver, saying, "Oh, there's a problem down there. Let's send this," and you direct it, and you send people. Sometimes you get to go and see the humanitarian activities undergoing while you're there,
Mm-hmm.
but not all the time. This one hit home because
Yeah.
the anything that you saw on television
Mm-hmm.
did not do justice to what happened with the island. I was the hurricane hit. I was on the phone with my mother, who was still living at the time, and we had she lives in a concrete home. That's a bunker, so nothing's going to happen to her. But
I would
we
expect
had-
nothing less from you.
Yeah, the backyard had an aluminum roof
Yeah.
on the terrace that I could hear when she was on the phone. The wind was banging,
Oh, slamming it up and down, yeah.
and down. It ended up in somebody's house, flying across. The people, I want to say disasters can go one of two ways.
Mhm.
You can have people just go towards the scientific term of entropy and become total disorder and chaos, because everything in the world tends towards entropy. Everything tends towards disorder.
Mhm.
Or the heart that people have and that sense of community and humanity comes out.
Mhm.
And to be honest, I was there 5 days after the hurricane. I was one of the first American Airlines flight. My mom is there. I got to go get her.
Right.
And
This is
I
you
saw-
going as a civilian.
Yes, nothing to do. I said, because as I said, Puerto Rico is not part of SOUTHCOM.
No, if it were up to you, you'd have both of those
Yeah,
hospital ships
So,
right there.
and actually, we had one of the hospital ships. The
Oh, good. Okay.
The
Comfort?
Comfort. The
Yeah.
Comfort was in San Juan and would go around the island and dock. But the problem with the Comfort being in Puerto Rico is when you have no communication, how do you tell people to go to the port and get healthcare? A little difficult. So it was a total collapse of infrastructure, because everybody now lives with these, devices. And there was only one place right across the street from the international airport. There was a big bridge in an open area where you would get some signals.
Okay.
And you actually had traffic jams of people going there to try to call people back and say, "I'm fine." But I just saw a side of humanity that I really didn't expect. And it's sad to say, sometimes you expect the worst, but neighbor helping neighbor. Somebody in the community would say, "Hey, I cooked today, don't cook," because there was limitations on propane gas to cook.
Mhm.
There was limitations on gasoline. The period of time that I was there, I remember I had to wait 4 hours in line to get gas.
Mm.
So I think it really brought the community together, and I think sad to say, some of that is gone. But it kind of showed me what we as human beings are capable of when under an extreme circumstance of, I don't know where my next meal is coming from. Mm-hmm. There are no supermarkets where we're going to buy food. So it was a pleasant surprise, and gives me great hope for humanity that you can, instead of going to, the bottom pyramid of Maslow's hierarchy of needs and say, I want my basic needs right now and forget everybody else, to saying, hey, we've been neighbors for 40 years. Let's work together. I mean, they would take turns on one of the neighbors that they found a place that had ice, and he would go and buy ice for everybody. So I was devastated because as we're flying over the island, and it was a 777 American Airlines flight that was packed mostly with American Airlines employees. The entire crew was Puerto Rican. And you're flying over it, and you see it devastated. But the human side of people are what moved them ahead. I was very gratified by that people were able to move on. There was areas that, didn't get help for a very long time because up in the mountains, there's one road. How do you get there? But the National Guard in Puerto Rico helped a lot, and the military helped a lot. So it was, I'm not going to say a happy ending because people died. People lost their livelihoods. People lost their homes. But I think that when you overflew that island and you saw what had happened, could have been a lot worse. Much, much worse. So that, I believe, happened in 2017. And there's still areas that have not fully recovered. And I don't mean, homes. I mean just livelihoods that were destroyed and things like that. But after doing humanitarian operations for 20 years, that wouldn't hit home.
Yeah. And I can imagine, because you weren't in charge. Because
I know.
That's the biggest frustration.
And I'm making phone calls to friends of mine that work in Northern Command saying, hey, how's it going? Hey, can I help? Hey, I'm busy. Leave me alone. Okay.
That must be so surreal for you.
Yeah.
Because you, with the flip of a switch, you could already go anywhere and convert a whole area, and then here's your own homeland, and it's you're just a spectator.
Yep. And I was very gratified I was able to convince my mother to go with me because she didn't want to leave.
Of course not.
Because, as I said, the sense of community is really what shocked me. She didn't have a generator. Neighbors did. They powered her refrigerator. They powered a fan for her to sleep. They fed her every day. So, I mean, she wanted to stay, but then I thought about it and I said, I know you want to stay, but no matter what, you're being a burden. And you're my burden. You're not their burden.
Right.
Because it's more gasoline that has to be used. Because now you're not just powering your refrigerator, you're powering 2 refrigerators. And no matter what, it's more food in a place that has scarcity. Right. So I was able to convince her, saying, hey, come with me. And she stayed with me for about 6 months until things kind of stabilized.
There's also the issue of health, because God forbid she would get some sort of health condition, flare up.
Where do you go?
Where do you go? The hospitals were down. I remember at the time, Elon Musk had sent over those panels and generators and whatnot for the hospitals.
Yeah.
Because it's not like it's a very mountainous region, so you can't just lay down cables and everything's fine. You have to helicopter in everything, and
there were Tesla batteries that were donated and solar panels and all that. So that, and I think he also provided internet.
As someone that is an expert in logistics, what was your feeling when on Reuters, on CNN, on BBC, there will be images of all these supplies that had been donated for the Puerto Rican people to use just sitting on a tarmac? And it got to the point where they were literally manning a cameraman on it so that the moment that it would get picked up, they'd be reporting it live. And that cameraman spent all day, all the next day, all the day after that, to the point where they pulled the cameraman away because there was no activity happening. How does it make you feel? Because I know you can mobilize
That side of humanity did not
in
impress me.
minutes.
That side of humanity did not impress me.
Yeah.
Because I'll be blunt with you. I think what happened was people wanted to take care of their families first.
Mm.
Truck drivers wanted to take care of their families. People in the National Guard wanted to make sure their family was safe and taking care of them. And it took, I think, about a week for things to say, okay, my family's good. I got food. I got water for them. Let me go out.
So Maslow,
Yes.
on a societal level.
Yes. Across the board.
Yeah. And the
Across the
problem
board.
is the machine doesn't work if it's doing individual things.
Absolutely. And that's what people reverted to. Cops,
Yeah.
policemen. Hey, I got to take care of my family.
Mm-hmm.
So it was across the board. Everybody ran to say, okay, let me make sure that we're safe here.
Mm-hmm.
And then I go on to my job. And the other problem was, how do you call your drivers? There's no phones.
Again, this is where the military succeeds because they have their own infrastructure built in.
Yep.
How do you get a civilian population to organize when their infrastructure is gone?
I mean, there were
It's not like they're all on the same radio station if they even have a radio.
one place where you could get good signal in San Juan.
Yeah, that one place where
The bridge, and it was, but yeah, it was frustrating. And by the way, the same thing happened in Haiti during the Haiti earthquake in 2010.
and I would think it'd be worse
Where
there.
the tarmac was just overloaded with stuff. In that case, we had a lot of military people on the ground,
Mhm.
but the limiting factor was you couldn't get stuff there because everything had to do through lift. Buildings are collapsed, roads are blocked. Because, okay, there's two different things. In a hurricane, you have a flood, it recedes, and good. In an earthquake, if you have collapsed buildings, normally they're going to block the road. And that's what happened. There were areas there where the entire building just caked sideways. Now how you get through that? So the first order of business, I know it's saving lives, but was let's clear the road so we can deliver supplies.
The basic stuff. Has there ever been a situation where a country has suffered some sort of disaster in which the military would have been ideal in order to help out, but for public relations reasons, for optics reasons, they said, we got it from here. We'll take care of our own problem.
I'll give you a very recent example. Spain. Spain, 22 days ago,
Yeah.
had the floods in Valencia,
Yeah.
okay? They did not ask for the military because remember, they have a history of dictatorship from the Franco era.
Right.
And the government thought, who wants to see uniformed people on the streets of Valencia? Well, guess what? The people that live in Valencia wanted to see uniformed people there helping them. So
Right.
it took them about a week to be able to call the military up
Mm-hmm.
and help them. Now they're there. But that week,
And mind you, this is their own military.
yes.
It's not like it's a foreign military.
No, it is.
So optics are so strong that in some cases, even against yourself, it's basically like you hating on a part of your body. It makes no sense.
Yeah, it was. My first reaction, because we have family in Madrid and in the northern part of Spain, and my wife does, and they have property in Valencia.
Mm.
So the first thing was I called them. It's like, hey, the day after, it's like, well, we're fine. We're on higher ground, but it's a disaster, and I haven't seen a single military person around. And then the finger pointing because in Spain you have the autonomous communities or comunidad autónoma that really is supposed to be in charge of that area
Mm-hmm.
that has to ask the central government for help.
Mm-hmm.
But the central government can always say, I know you need help and send it. So the autonomous community didn't ask for it and the central government didn't do it either because I think they're both thinking the same thing.
Right.
Do we want to, bring the military to the streets again? That, it's a pretty young democracy. It started in the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
So Franco was in charge for,
Well, he had a heck of a job fixing the economy, apart from all the other issues.
Yeah.
But
So Valencia is, again, it's funny that you asked that. That just happened. And nobody will admit it. But me as an outsider looking in saying,
And someone in the know,
I know what happened. You just didn't want, people from the Ejército going around helping people because it might bring bad memories to people.
To be fair, for some people, it was terrible. For others, it was great.
Yeah.
It all depends what side of the situation you're in.
Exactly. So I think that's a very recent example of, you have this, what I call organic capability in every country, because normally every military, big or small, has two things they do well: communication and logistics. No matter where it is, it could be, Central America, they do very well communication and logistics. What are two things you need after the disaster? Communication and logistics. But people hesitate. Even in this country, we have the Posse Comitatus law, which means the U.S. military cannot engage in the continental United States, but there's an exception, a disaster. During Hurricane Irma in New Orleans. I mean, they went in and they put the hospital ship on, they helped and all that. And now, during the pandemic, do you know who was doing COVID-19 vaccines in Miami-Dade College? Active duty Army military.
I remember my wife and I, we were actually one of the first to get it. And they had all these tents set up. In our case, it was near where Inter Miami Soccer.
Yep.
They had a facility there. But same thing, it was the military that was handling it because, again, they are among the best for logistics.
I remember I got a call from a friend of mine that was coming over to deployment before. They said, it's like, hey, you're going to have, I think it was like 300 of your closest friends are coming over. It's like, well, what do you mean? And they deploy people to separate areas in Miami to go ahead and give it. And it was very successful because they're great at moving people through the line.
Well, it was terrifying because when you showed up, this is right at the beginning, there were ambulances outside just in case it was necessary. They were checking you in. No sooner did they check you in, there's already another person getting you. And I'm like, okay, I guess we're here because I'm like looking for where to sit. There was no time for that. They were already moving you to the next place and then the next place. 6 moves later, they have me, they're ready. Okay, we're going to give it to you. Okay, now sit there. And then they were just staring at me to make sure that I was fine. Mind you, this was an experimental vaccine at the time. Technically still is. And they said, thank you. You can leave. Compliments of the U.S. government. And I'm like, okay, thank you very much, USA. It was very efficient. And I could only imagine that that's exactly how it is wherever you go.
Before you deploy, we call them shot X's, which is a shot exercise. They line you up. There's a check-in desk and either 2 or 4 people giving shots. They sit you down. Is this you? There's your phone. Okay. Check your ID card. Sit over there and wait 15 minutes to make sure you don't have an adverse reaction.
Right.
That's it. And you're done.
I honestly thought that the pandemic was going to be the gun, from the old days.
Yeah.
But thankfully, nope, not necessary.
I'm old enough to have gotten a gun.
Exactly. I mean, you can still see the people with the marks.
Yeah.
You're dealing with a lot of different individuals in different roles. You've had so many roles. I mean, you could really speak very well about this. What has been your experience regarding leadership, regarding what you think feels like the most, I don't want to say efficient or optimal, but the most effective leadership styles that have worked, whether because you saw someone else do it, or they were your leader, or you were their leader, whatever the case may be, that has produced what you feel is the best result overall?
I really, that's a very tough question because there's a saying that says different strokes for different folks. You can have your leadership style, but again, different things motivate people differently. And you have to adjust what you do to motivate different people to row in the same direction. I hate to keep using that analogy, but it's a great one because if you're all in a boat and you're rowing in different, you're going to go in circles. Right. So I tend to have the trust but verify philosophy.
Well, tell me that. I'm familiar with it, but tell me again.
Which is, I always assume utmost competence, utmost professionalism, and just utmost motivation until you prove me otherwise.
Okay.
And I believe that you have to give people the opportunity to prove that they either can or cannot do the job and not make assumptions by anything. I mean, and listen, in the military, we have stereotypes about, different specialties and, this guy's a missileer or this guy's an intel guy and there's different types of personalities that go into different specialties with exceptions, of course. But what you have to do as a leader is not look at where they came from. Find out about the person, not the specialty. The specialty is what they do. The leader, the person is who they are. And I think the more you find out about who they are, of course, but within limits, you don't want to know the person's entire life. But in general, you want to find out what makes them tick. You can adjust your style to say, okay, we're going to go in this direction and get at least the majority of the people and readjust in the process. I think autocratic leadership styles, I've seen them work for a very short period of time. Very short period of time. We'll comply. You're in charge.
After a while, the people either burn out or they numb out.
Exactly. And complete laissez-faire,
That never works.
That's a disaster.
Well, I ask because it's relevant to our audience, to our primary audience. A lot of groups, especially entrepreneurs, you get a group of entrepreneurs and you put them on a team. They don't want to pick a leader. They don't want to follow any plan. They don't even want to create the plan because then it requires them to follow it. They'd rather just everyone be an individual contributor and somehow it'll magically work its way out. Have you seen this in practice and fail miserably, or has it ever succeeded?
Yeah, because I mean, let's use the analogy of trying to build a plane.
Okay.
And how do you want to make the plane go fast? Some guy, let's put a big engine on it. Well, what about lift? Well, let's put big wings on it. Well, what about by the time you're done, you have a non-flyable plane. So you have to at least put some constraints on the laissez-faire and say, hey, we want a fighter jet that's going to be an air superiority fighter. And our target is the Su-35 that has vertical lift and all that. Here's your specs. Build me that. Because you just say build a plane, you end up with a bus with wings that doesn't go anywhere. And people have fantastic ideas, but when you and I understand when you're doing brainstorming, it's that storm of ideas in the planning process. You should not say, oh, no, that's a bad idea. Let the ideas flow.
Right.
But there has to be a point where you say, okay, this is what we got. Now let's analyze them and say, which ideas are more suited to what our objective is? And that's why I keep saying vision and objective.
Okay.
To me, one of the clearest visions that I've ever seen, ever by any corporation, was Microsoft.
Okay.
A computer in every desk in every home.
Very straight to the point.
No arguments. And then you say, why a computer? Well, without a computer, there's no software. Very clear. Okay, so we're going to make sure that we build software that's compatible with computers that'll be accessible to people so that we have them everywhere. And now we don't have a computer in every home. We have a computer in every pocket because that's what your phone is.
Right.
So the vision is something that, personal opinion, sometimes is more important than the mission because it gives you that North Star, that direction to where you want to take the company. What is it that's going to make the company successful? If you have a computer in every desk in every home, you're going to sell a lot of software.
It reminds me of the old model where the individual's saying, he's answering, oh, what business are you in? He's talking to the bank. He's like, oh, I'm in entertainment. And the bank person says, no, you're in the liquor business. You're just providing the venue to convince people to want to spend the money on the liquor. But you're in the liquor business.
And one of the more dramatic changes that I saw for a tech company was Dell.
Okay.
Dell computers.
Yeah, quite a few problems lately.
They changed, but I want to say about 15 years ago.
Oh,
They said they are not an IT company or a computer company or any of that. They are a supply chain company.
oh, that's interesting.
Because all they were doing was ensuring that that supply chain was basically just in time to deliver the things, to assemble the product, to push it out the door. So their priority was to be a supply chain company that got everything to the right place at the right time so that the assembly line could do their thing.
What an interesting perspective.
So
I get that for Amazon. I don't get it for Dell.
but Dell,
Which could explain why Dell's.
Yeah.
They were a powerhouse for a very long time.
but I think that what Michael Dell was trying to do was refocus the company because they were getting too focused on the building of the computer and what we're going to have in it. No, if we don't have components,
This is all
we don't have a computer.
Right.
And everything was made in China. He wanted to make sure that the components, sometimes the assembly line would stop because you didn't have enough stuff of whatever the component was. So he switched the focus to make sure it's going to be lean, it's going to be just in time, and we'll make sure that if our objective for that day is to assemble, 2,000, 5,500 Dell laptops, that we have the number of components that it requires for you to build it. So to me, it was, I actually went to a supply chain course in Penn State, and one of the people from Dell said that was the reason. They came to speak and they said one of the reasons was we were having issues with supply chain, and he refocused it to do that. But then you eventually have to refocus it to your business because having a good supply chain, how do you make sure that you have the latest and greatest state of the art, that you're using the fastest chip? How do you do that? Well, that goes in your mission. Honestly, vision's short. Everybody reads it, and it gives you an idea in which direction the organization is going. A very long vision is not a vision; it's a dissertation. So,
what is it? A plan is not a strategy.
Exactly.
It's just a to-do list.
Yeah, exactly. So, and it's like I tell people in the office. I always tell them, if you're not providing solutions, you're only admiring the problem.
Apple did something interesting because, as you know, the chip lithography that's done at, I think it's called TCSM or TSCM. They're the ones that create the chips over in Taiwan. And they were having so many chip shortages, and they didn't want that to be an issue moving forward. Apple started designing their own chips, and they created a plant as a partnership, I think in Arizona.
Yep.
So it's becoming its own little software and tech corridor. Because, supply chain is such an issue, especially with the way that the geopolitics is changing with China as far as our posture with them. Because for a while we were partners, and we're not partners, and they're the enemy, then they're not the enemy. And it keeps vacillating. And in the meantime, the business owner is like, well,
what do I do?
What do I do? Right, because they need supply.
And I think that what you're going to see is not a complete decoupling of our economies, but a slow walk towards that. And looking at areas like Vietnam, our former enemy, Vietnam, Cambodia, Malaysia, you're going to start seeing a lot of that. Because remember how China started. When they joined the World Trade Organization, they just made cheap components. Then they kept going up the ladder to building better and better and better stuff by copying our stuff, of course.
Right.
But they
have like zero IP law. Just
so the quality of Chinese components started improving, and their labor costs are, a fifth of what they are in the rest of the world. But that's changing because I have an emerging middle class, and that's just Wally Diaz's opinion. I think that we have some structural problems in this country regarding our national debt and real estate and all that, but we don't have the gigantic structural problems that China has because, first of all, it's a much bigger country. They have a very, very large population of poor people, and not poor by U.S. standards.
Poor by world standards.
Poor by world standards. So, because here, anybody that lives in Appalachia, hey, they have a house. Some of them have cars. They're working poor, but that's not what we're talking about in China. And eventually, people are going to say, everybody that is that emerging middle class moved ahead. What about us?
Right.
And that's just, and outsiders look at that, and the real estate bubble they have is ginormous.
No, I am constantly amazed by people's cognitive dissonance as to their place in the world, because the poorest person in the United States, the homeless person in the United States, is still in the top 1% of the world population.
Yeah.
And if that's ever in doubt, I always remind people of the story where I was one time in downtown and I saw a homeless person. And as I was approaching to, give $1, they were on a cell phone call and they said, "Could you please wait a moment?" I had to wait in order to give them a donation. So that just goes to show even our poorest people are in the top 1%. How do you see poverty as an instrument or a challenge in your work? Because sadly, you're not going into Paris, you're not going into London or Berlin. You're going into some of the most rural, most difficult areas to go into. Forget that there's no infrastructure. You also have the population that's just poverty-stricken.
Well, I think that what we try to do when we do that is actually provide some government presence, because normally when we go somewhere, that host nation government goes with us.
Okay.
They go, they provide security, you have Minister of Health people. So it's not just us going alone. We go with the partner nation.
Right.
And that actually, we've seen, kind of gives them a twinkle in the eye that, hey, these people did not forget me.
Mm.
And there's actually somebody that cares. And what we try to do is that outward facing face is the host nation government. So that they're the ones that are making sure that they do the triage of the patients and all that. And then just when you come inside to get the providers, as in you get us. So it gives them that face, it gives them that presence, and I know that it's kind of ridiculous to think, well, it gives them hope. Well, I've seen it personally. Just the change of their expression when they go outside of the tent, and one of the most I think life-changing surgeries that we do. There's 2 of them. We have a partnership with Operation Smile, and they do cleft palate surgeries. And the other one is when we do cataract surgeries. And you actually, somebody that was blind can now see.
Wow.
I mean, that is just the expression and the life change that you do is just amazing. So I think deal with, of course, abject poverty, but I think providing some sort of government presence from the local government, and just reminding them that you're not forgotten, at least while we're there. So that's what gives me solace, is that at least for the period of time that we're there,
Right.
those people get taken care of. They get to see a healthcare provider, sometimes the first time ever in their life.
Right.
They see a healthcare provider, and they get, at least for a period of time, what they need.
Talk to me about blockchain. So you seem to be quite interested in how it fits within the world of healthcare, within the world of global healthcare with what you do. How can you describe it to someone? Because the way I see blockchain is it's a data management system. It's just basically a universal ledger. How do you see it implemented in a way that makes sense for the operations that you deal with?
I think having the problem is that right now there's so many issues with hacking of healthcare records and getting personal information. And you see one like every day on TV. Oh yeah, they got all the personal information from these people, and they got the healthcare records from these people, and that's a very personal stuff. I'm a believer, and I think that using the distributed ledger of blockchain can help have a more secure system. Because when's the last time you heard anybody hack Bitcoin and steal money from somebody that has their Bitcoin in blockchain?
Right.
So I know that, hey, we have antivirus, we have this, we have that. I think that distributed ledger so that somebody that's in a military hospital in Germany
Mhm.
can use the key to see it, just like they use a password,
Mm-hmm.
and seal it off. And somebody in the Wilford Hall Medical Center does it too. I haven't really looked a lot at the security aspect, but that's exactly what concerns me, the security aspect. And I think that blockchain may be better. There's some drawbacks to blockchain. Everybody knows, they are very energy intensive.
Mm-hmm.
And as we come into concerns with global warming and climate change and all that, it may be a problem with blockchain. But I think if we want to secure it, if we want to secure healthcare records, if we want to secure company information, if we want to do that, I know hackers will probably figure out a way.
There's always a way.
But I see it as a more secure way than what we're doing right now, or anybody with a username and password that you have a hacker go in and try 1,000 times from different IP addresses. We'll figure it out.
Well, one of the issues that I saw with blockchain is putting data servers inside some sort of steel container, submerging it in water, only to come to realize that because of global warming, even a 1 degree difference makes such a big impact on a self-contained, basically an oven that cooks from the inside. So that's obviously something that's still being worked on. I mean, I know the military has their own interests as far as that's concerned, but that's definitely in play. It's things that are being discussed amongst the people in the know. Like, this is a topic.
And this is one of the things that we in U.S. Southern Command, we try to have be the innovation command, where if there's new technology the military's developing,
Mm-hmm.
we talk to one of our partners and say, is it okay if we try it here?
Mm-hmm.
And we do. I mean, we're not talking weapons, we're talking like drones or just a better delivery system or stuff like that, or technology for infrared, things that are non-harmful and we're not. Let's test a nuclear weapon in your backyard. It's new technology that has transferability to the civilian sector too.
Okay.
Because a lot of the things that we now take for granted were
Started.
developed by the military.
Yeah.
The internet. It was called DARPANET.
DARPANET. I love that. Going back for a second, you talked about diplomacy in different initiatives, for example, your time in Geneva. How does leadership look at that level? Because now you're dealing with world leaders, you're dealing with their representatives, you're dealing with the corporate equivalent of a vice president, the individuals that are actually doing the work. How does leadership look at that level?
I think, I don't want to put this nicely, it's patient leadership. Because there are times when anybody that's negotiating,
Uh-huh.
and as you go to buy a new car, you're negotiating with a salesman
Mhm.
to get a better price. Before you get there, you have a number in mind.
Mm-hmm.
Diplomacy is the same.
Okay.
Each country has a negotiating position,
Mm-hmm.
and they have a number in mind. And how you get to that number or fall back from that really, and I've seen it where it's a lot of interpersonal relations and how that emerges without being tied to what my country's allegiance is. The most successful ambassadors and the most successful diplomats
Mm-hmm.
are the ones who try to get to that negotiating position without going back to saying, well, this is our position. Saying it without saying it and being very subtle about it. Because walking in and saying, this is it, we're not walking back, everybody knows you're lying. In
Okay.
negotiation, your first position is never your final position.
Sure.
And that goes for the Russians, that goes for the Ukrainians, that goes for everybody. So I think, again, very patient leadership, because it could take weeks to get to a position, especially on sensitive issues.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, I think the war in Ukraine, no matter what anybody says, that's going to be a negotiated settlement.
Yes.
That's going to be a negotiated settlement, and that's coming. So I think what both countries are doing right now is trying to either expand their territory or hold on to what they have,
Mm-hmm.
so they get to the table and say, hey, I got a piece of Russia. Hey, I got a piece of Ukraine.
Yeah, you can't negotiate with what you don't have.
Exactly.
Right.
So I think it can take weeks to get to negotiations. You've seen it in negotiations for union contracts, where they lock themselves up and they're hours and hours and hours, and then they have to leave and go consult. Most of the times they're not consulting with anybody. They have a number in mind and they fake that they're calling people. It's all theater.
But it's interesting though, because when you're talking on a world stage, you'll have a Qatari delegation that will have a problem with perhaps a proposed, oil trade. But there's like 37 different BATNAs. There's so many better alternatives, and they're pretty equivalent to each other. So it's not like one's better, it's the preferred one. It's like, okay, what are you going to do? And you're interacting with so many different people. That's why I was curious to know what leadership would look like when everyone is the same rank, if you will. Everyone's the same level.
But even if you're at the same level, you're not. There's unspoken rule, especially if you're talking about negotiating for access.
Okay.
Let's say you want to build a base in, I don't know, Bangladesh.
Mm-hmm.
Who do you think's going to have more power in that? The Bangladeshi delegation or the Russian delegation that's trying to finagle a base there? Initially, the Bangladeshis are going to play hard to get,
Mm-hmm.
and they're going to be in charge and say, we want the world.
Well, that's happening right now with Mexico. Mexico is tired of seeing all this possible revenue that they could be earning slipping through the Panama Canal. And so now they have that train connector in order to bring the material over, even though it's more of a hassle, but it's cheaper.
Yep.
So now the person that's shipping the container is trying to decide which way to go. This way is faster or easier. This way is cheaper. We are a business after all, and we're about being cheap. So,
I mean, look at what's happening in the Red Sea right now around the Strait of Hormuz that the Houthis are firing. Now they've changed a route. That's a lot more expensive to deliver anything instead of going through there. So I think that the negotiations are going to be, when you're talking about international diplomacy, you always go in with instructions.
mm-hmm.
Here's our position. If you're going to move away from that position, you need to ask for additional instructions. So no ambassador or negotiator walks in saying, yeah, we got it. Unless, if you see a quick negotiation,
Mm-hmm.
it means that they both got what they wanted.
And that's usually bad. Because that means they could have gotten so much more, and they didn't because they went for the easy win.
Yep. So it's, and again, the leadership in a negotiation of equals,
Mm-hmm.
there's never
equals. There's always somebody that's a little.
some like I say, some are more equal than others, and in cases like that, when you're talking about basing, access, and all that,
Mm-hmm.
the host nation's in charge.
Okay.
No doubt, because they'll ask for the moon.
Do you find that translates to the corporate world, where people have a home base advantage? That tends to be the case. Okay.
Yeah, because I mean, you're the one who wants what I have.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to convince me that what you're trying to sell me or you're trying to get me to do for you
Mhm.
also benefits me. How's
Okay.
it going to benefit me? Okay, so you want to put, an Air Force base, a Russian Air Force base in Bangladesh.
Mm-hmm.
How does that benefit me? I sell to the United States. How are they going to see it? Are you going to buy what the United States doesn't buy? Are you going to give me the protection the United States gives me by treaty? And I'm making stuff up. They
Sure.
don't have treaties or anything like that.
Right.
But those are the kind of things that go into it. It's like, are you going to make sure that if Tomorrow, China decides, or India says, hey, Bangladesh is mine again. Are you going to defend me? So those are all the things that go into it. And anybody that goes into a negotiation, especially in international relations, thinking that there's going to be no surprises is in for a huge surprise. I've seen it over and over again. You think, hey, I know they're going to go for this. This is what they want. We already know. It's like they can want something completely different.
Well, a situation that always concerns individuals that come to me and ask are when the deal isn't really the deal. Meaning you make a deal, it's been working for a while, and all of a sudden one of the sides decides that they want to break off from the deal, and it almost seems like a cash grab. Like they're trying to do something in order to get more out of it and negotiate by force. And I guess a political version of it would be Turkey. We have a base in Turkey. We have two bases in Turkey, excuse me. And for all I know, more things too. We have a reasonably good relationship with them. And then due to optics or whatnot, all of a sudden there's some rancor on the other side with threats of, oh, maybe we don't need your bases here. And it's always, when I see these situations in my head, I'm like, oh, this is a ploy to get something else out of it. The question is, what is that thing?
And a lot of times going into negotiations, you don't know. You don't know. Maybe it's, we got somebody from the Israeli Knesset that said some negative things about Turkey. If you can make them take it back, then you can keep the bases. And then the wheels start turning.
Right.
So it could be something as simple as that.
As just saving face.
Yes. Because in international negotiations, at the table when you're negotiating, nobody will cave.
Okay.
Nobody will say, yeah, you got it.
It has to feel like everyone lost a little bit.
And then they go in the sidebars and they chat, and each delegation, depending on what you're negotiating, has a cocktail party, and more business gets done at the cocktail party.
Well, I think that's universal.
Than at the table. Because at the table, especially in our case, in arms control, it was Russia, Ukraine, Kazakhstan, and Belarus.
Okay.
Russia didn't want to lose face with their former Soviet Union partners. So a lot of times they would catch us aside and say, yeah, we're good with that. We'll just write it up or whatever. But they wouldn't say it in public. It would come on the minutes later. This is what they agreed to. And everybody's like, what the hell?
So instead of having one good global deal, they'd rather have a small, okay deal, but with a lot of side deals, so that it still addresses those concerns people have, but not in an open, in-your-face type way.
Exactly. And it doesn't have they caved.
And this translates to the corporate world because there are some individuals that feel the same way. They don't want to have a big open deal of some sort. They'd rather have these, collateral issues be resolved privately, I guess.
The UAW deals.
Okay.
I mean, that all happened offline. At the table, nobody said, yeah, we come to an agreement without having a meeting. I believe they did it outside of a meeting. Hey, they agreed to terms. How did that happen? General Motors didn't want to come out and say, yeah, we lost. UAW didn't want to do the in-your-face thing either. So they agreed to,
Well, I ask because a lot of business students, of course, as you know, have to go through negotiations. They have to learn the basics of it. And then as the negotiation simulations get more complicated, all of a sudden, behavioral science starts becoming a factor.
Yep.
Understanding what motivates, what influences. Do you find that the same skills that make you a good leader, and I hate using the word leader, but I mean, because you're really a partner in trying to accomplish that shared vision. Do you find that it's equitable or practical in the negotiation space?
I think so, because I believe...
Because there you're kind of like an aggressor.
Well, it depends, because again, there's different leadership styles. And I already told you what I believe in Trust But Verify, which is not the autocratic style. It's like giving the people the opportunity to prove themselves to go in one way or another. I think that in negotiations, you do the same thing. You want to see what is their negotiating position. For example, in mergers and acquisitions, same thing. Okay, you want to buy my company. How much are you offering? What is What is the stock value that you're placing on it when you're going to buy stock enough to acquire it?
Mhm.
And does that benefit my shareholders? Does that benefit my employees? And I know mergers and acquisitions, that's a bad word for any employee because that normally means,
Someone's getting fired.
yep. So how many of those people are going to lose their jobs? How many of those people are, what severance packages are we looking at for?
Mhm.
So I think that having the ability to give and take and do those types of negotiations where you act empathetically, say, hey, put yourself in the position of them. They have members of their enterprise that have been loyal to them for years,
Mhm.
and they're about to lose their jobs. What would I like to be able to have or give to take care of the people that belong to my enterprise? And that enables you to better understand it. Sometimes you can't get there because it's all about the numbers. In mergers and acquisitions, is always somebody is trying to merge with you or acquire you
Mhm.
because there's a financial interest that's going to benefit them. They're not doing it out of the goodness of their heart. So if you can get to that win-win, it's fantastic. But the win-win is very, very difficult because win-win means you both give something up.
Mm.
And human nature normally is like, I want to win at all costs and I want it all. So if you want to get to that win-win where they both leave the table saying, I didn't get all I wanted, you didn't either, but we both got something, that requires a skill and, again, patient leadership. You have to be very, very patient and say, I understand what it is that you're trying to get to. And I feel that if it were my employees, I would be having the same concerns. Let me see what I can come up with regarding severance packages, retraining to other areas,
Mhm.
looking at job placement through what is it that we can do to soften the blow when we get this acquisition or when we get this merger done.
Mhm.
But nowadays that's not done. It's like, we're going to buy you, here's the stock price, buy. Oh, 10,000 layoffs. What happens to them? And I think that one of the advantages that I've always thought that Asian cultures have to ours is that they don't think in quarters. They think in decades.
They're collectivists and they're long term.
And they're long term. Here, Western mindset is, okay, I have to report quarterly earnings in September 30th.
Mhm.
I'm going to do as much as I can, because I got to get my bonus. I'm the CEO.
Right.
So my bonus is driven by corporate earnings. There's a great example that I always use of, I was living in Washington, D.C. at the time when I was at the Pentagon. And we had a company, this is during the .com boom in I think it was 1999, 2000. A company called MicroStrategy. They were a software services company.
Mhm.
Their stock price was like $300, something ridiculous.
Okay.
And at the time, remember, .coms, a lot of them didn't even make a profit, but they were $500 a share and ridiculous prices. And the CEO at the time decided to recognize some earnings from the following quarter to the current quarter
Mhm.
so he could make his numbers.
Wow.
What happened? The SEC got a hold of that, Securities and Exchange Commission, and it ended up overnight being almost a penny stock
Wow.
because of financial irregularities, violations, and all that. So I think that we are so focused on making that next quarter.
Mhm.
Sometimes we lose sight. Hey, we didn't make our numbers. If on the earnings call, everybody gets on and you have a good explanation. Hey, we have this contract that is coming online next quarter
Mhm.
that will more than make up for that gap and all the other contracts that we have in line. But the aversion to saying, hey, we're not going to make it, got the best of them.
Well, I think that's, a much more a result of this public traded need to have constant growth no matter what happens. And the problem is it doesn't allow companies to innovate by having, oh, let me just have 3 bad quarters while we restructure and go into a new direction. They can't do that.
Well, look at one of the best examples I have of a private company that's really owned by the employees is Publix. That's why when you go to Publix and say,
The local grocer here
yes,
in Florida.
the local grocer here in Florida, Publix is owned by their employees. They have no shareholders. And you can go to Publix and say, I want you to bring me a case of 25 bags of pork rinds from Puerto Rico. They'll find a distributor and bring it to you. They're going to pay for it.
Mhm.
But you try to do that at Winn-Dixie, which is another grocer. You're trying to publicly trade a company, and may lose money doing that
Mm-hmm.
in shipping alone. So what it enables them to do, being a privately held company, they focus more on service. Shopping is a pleasure. That's their motto in Publix.
Right.
Why? Very clean, nice aisles, everything's beautiful.
Right.
So there's a price you pay for having a privately held company. They do basically what they want. They have to make their numbers. But the publicly traded company can't do that. They can't afford it.
No.
Because then if everybody comes in asking for special orders,
There
because they
goes-
heard that Wally asked for one, they're going to go broke.
There goes the growth.
Yep.
And then, okay. At least we're on the same page there too. You've talked at international conferences on Ebola. Tell me about that experience. Well, you've done it, I think, more than once.
Yeah, it was a unique experience right after the Ebola pandemic, or during the Ebola pandemic. We had several countries call us to ask, hey, how do we get an isolation chamber done in case we get an Ebola patient?
Right.
So following that, I got a lot of expertise in doing that more than I wanted to. And
To be fair, you're not a doctor.
no.
Even though you do everything but surgery.
Yeah. But, I learned a lot about how the virus is transmitted, and it's really not as infectious as people say. And for Ebola, I don't know if you remember, one of the first patients to get infected with Ebola arrived here, lived with his girlfriend for about a week, then went into the hospital and passed away. Think about it. That family was around him for a week. So how infectious was that disease? Really, you had to touch, which is why it was happening in places like Ghana, where they actually have to bathe the body once it dies before they bury it.
Okay.
So during the bathing of the body, you come in contact with bodily fluids that were infected with Ebola, and that's how it kept, spreading. So the Health and Human Services and the CDC went down there, tried to help them with it, and developed techniques for that. Because of culture, people followed it, people didn't. But at least we gave them the advice. We did it all in their local language, and send numerous experts down there. It was a unique experience on trying to deal with a bug that thankfully never made it to our region. It made it to the United States, but it didn't propagate. And what people were freaking out about is a couple of the patients that were brought. They were brought to Emory, and they were brought to UNO in Omaha. And the bodily fluids of the Ebola patients were released into the local sewage. Our sewage system is so good that they felt that it was fine to do it. And I had my doubts about it.
I was going to say, was it?
I had my doubts about it. But infectious disease people said, you're right.
If they're okay with it, then
that water's going to be treated. You don't want to do that in places where they don't treat the water.
Right.
So it's going to be treated. It's going to be fine. Don't worry about it. But I freaked out when I first heard of that.
Well, it does sound kind of.
Yeah, it's like, what?
It's kind of concerning. They're like.
So then after that, they had an International Committee of Military Medicine, and they wanted people to kind of share how they either gave training or dealt with Ebola in their country, and I was selected from SOUTHCOM to go and speak and give a talk about infection control, patient isolation, how it is that you dealt with the pandemic, how it spread, and how we were fortuitous enough, because it was really luck, to not get to our hemisphere. One of the countries that was very concerning to get to the hemisphere was Brazil, because they have direct flights from Africa, and they have a lot of commerce with Africa. And there's a lot of Portuguese-speaking African countries that are very aligned with Brazil. So that was one of the places, and we and the conference, of course, was in Bali, which beautiful place. But I had the opportunity to share the stage with a Chinese scientist, a Russian scientist, was in the German, and French, and I was the only really non-scientist that spoke, because I talked about the administrative aspects of Ebola and how to handle it and how to do infection control and how to isolate. We did a lot of training. We partnered with the Pan American Health Organization, which is the arm of the World Health Organization in Latin America, to do regional training for different countries. We did one in the Caribbean, one in Central America, and one in South America during the pandemic, to train people on how to handle, the biggest issue, and how one of our workers got infected was donning and doffing the PPE, putting it on and putting it off. And there's a right way to do it, because taking it off, person that's been dealing with somebody's bodily fluids, if you don't take it off in the correct way, you can actually come in contact with the bodily fluids and get infected. And that's how one of the healthcare workers got infected. She was saved because of the treatments here, but
she mishandled the protocol.
Yeah, because she wanted to take it off, and it takes two people to take it off, take it the proper way. We actually got to train people on how to do it. So if they did have one, or a suspected case, because you don't know, sometimes they're suspected Ebola. We had a couple of them, but it ended up not being Ebola. So it was, they appreciated the training once they heard that a nurse had gotten Ebola here in the United States by taking off the PPE, because basically it's almost like a spacesuit that you have to wear.
Yeah, because there's pressure inside because of a little machine that, yeah, to keep anything from going inward. Right, makes perfect sense. To call you a man about town is the understatement of the century, because you've had to run around everywhere, flying around everywhere. You have a hectic schedule. You're dealing with disasters and humanitarian missions. You're, one moment you're in the military doing these things, the next you're doing it as a civilian contractor, I believe.
No, federal employee.
Federal employee, okay, but you're still going 120 miles an hour. How do you find a way to balance your work schedule, with all these demanding initiatives pressing down on you?
I always try to spend, my what I call in air quotes free time with family. Family is number one for me, and one of the biggest sacrifices that you do by being in the military and just being in civil service and traveling a lot like I do is time away from family, and those are moments you never get back, and that's some of the things that you look back and say, hey, I miss birthdays, I missed anniversaries, and I missed time away from family. But when you look at what it was that you're doing and you evaluate what it was that you did, and you can look at yourself in the mirror and see that you have a supporting family, supporting wife that I can't say enough about, it can be done. But that to me is the loss, the regret. Thanksgiving, and I know it sounds great, Thanksgiving in Geneva, Switzerland. It's not an American holiday. We have to work. So, my wife and kids are back, and I know not getting shot at, but I'm not home.
I was going to say there are many times.
At home.
Even if you're just going as an inspector, someone's going to take a shot at you.
Yeah.
And you're behind enemy lines for all intents and purposes.
Yeah.
And you're there alone.
Yeah.
You're not there with your family. I mean,
it's been a challenge, but I think one that my wife very early on learned what this was about. She didn't know anything about the military when we first got married. And we got married. And then shortly after that, Desert Storm happened. And I was an instructor at a military school in Montgomery, Alabama. And I had a student that was a fighter pilot that she met and then just shared a meal with, because, you invite your students to the house and you have a little get together. And the following class, Desert Storm started. And for the graduation, we had a few people, a few casualties. One of the casualties was that student that was sitting next to her.
Oh, wow.
And that's when she realized what kind of business I was in. So I think it didn't alleviate any of the angst, but I think eyes wide open. Now I know where I'm at, because it's like she told me, I know of no other job that anybody has that you meet a colleague and then the next class, oh, your colleague got shot out of the sky and is no longer with us. So it enabled her to be resilient. I think that no matter how many accolades I get, she deserves twice the ones I have, because she stayed home, raised 2 great kids, and we have a great family.
I can't think of a better way to end this segment. Dr. Wally Diaz.
Thank you for your time. And I hope this was of value to people to see what this has been all about, and that there is hope. If you start with a purpose and go in the right direction, the sky's the limit. Never sell yourself short.
Thank you.
Service and sacrifice define true leadership. Let us remember to honor those who dedicate their lives to something greater than themselves. This episode is dedicated to those who serve with courage, love, and unwavering commitment. I'm Alex Ponce. Until next time, take care.